They say the Templars vanished. But what if they didn't? What if they sailed west far beyond the edge of the known world on a voyage cloaked in silence, not to escape, but to deliver? To carry a secret so old, so powerful, it could rewrite the story of civilization. A map that didn't point to treasure. A map that pointed to Atlantis. Not a myth, not a ruin, but a repository of forbidden knowledge sealed beneath the sea. A sunken library the Church vowed to erase, and the Templars they may have vowed to protect it. Let the urgency dissolve now. Let the tide pull you in gently. A hush falls over the centuries. The sails grow quiet, and all that remains is the pulse of something ancient. Just beneath the surface, the sea remembers what we forget. Across the pages of half-burned maps and the margins of lost chronicles, there are whispers of a voyage, one that began not with a compass, but with a question. What if the flood myths were memories? What if Atlantis wasn't lost, just hidden? And what if the guardians of that secret didn't disappear in 1307 but sailed into legend, disguised as exiles cloaked in ash and guided by a constellation only they understood? This isn't a story about a sunken city. This is a story about what that city held. Knowledge carved into stone tablets before the Nile had a name. Wisdom preserved in vaults beneath temples now long buried in sand and sea. The kind of knowledge that could unsettle empires. The kind of knowledge that had to be protected. Tonight you'll follow the threads. Through ancient texts, half-truths, and forbidden voyages. You'll drift past the edges of what we're told is history and into the quiet depths where it sleeps. Waiting. Watching. Before we venture further into the shadows, take a moment to subscribe so you never miss a secret that history has tried to forget. The story always begins with water. It is whispered in waves and hinted at in the pull of tides. When Plato described Atlantis, he wasn't just telling a cautionary tale about pride. He was speaking of a civilization that burned with brilliance, then sank beneath the ocean's skin. But what did it leave behind? Gold, perhaps. Temples, maybe. Yet across centuries, the most persistent detail isn't about power or palaces. It's about knowledge. A library, a collection of writings, devices, and star charts, so advanced later ages would call it magic. Plato called them tablets written by the first gods. Others described them as crystal records humming with memory. Later mystics spoke of metal books bound in silver etched with languages older than Babylon. These weren't idle embellishments. They were persistent echoes. From Egypt to Mesoamerica, a strangely consistent idea appears that a pre-flood civilization stored its wisdom anticipating a fall. In ancient Sumerian myths, the god Enki hides the universal laws and technologies before the flood comes. In Indian traditions, Manu preserves texts aboard a boat waiting out cosmic destruction. In both cases, the flood doesn't destroy, all it forces a rebirth. And somewhere between survival and silence, the idea of the preserved library emerges. Not just salvaged scrolls, but blueprints, instructions for rebuilding, or warnings never to try. When archaeologists probed the ruins of Thonis Heracleion off the coast of Egypt, they didn't just find statues. They found evidence of organized storage, chambered vaults, as if designed to protect or hide. The same pattern reappears in ruins off the coast of Cuba, in the deep structures around Yonaguni, and in the supposed foundations beneath the waters near Bimini. There is no proof of books, but there is suggestion architecture that implies purpose, and often that purpose feels eerily archival. The Knights Templar, centuries later, were obsessed with knowledge. They excavated beneath Solomon's temple not for gold, but for secrets. The idea that they could have encountered writings, records of ancient civilizations, is not as far-fetched as it sounds. The Templars had contact with Eastern scholars, Muslim mystics, and Byzantine monks. They traded translated and hoarded scrolls, and if any among them believed the tale of Atlantis held truth, it would not have been mythology they sought. It would have been the library. A curious document long dismissed as apocryphal, called the Chronicon Templari, describes a hidden codex stored in a stone vault beyond the Pillars of Hercules. Some claim it was written in a lost tongue. Others say it could only be read under moonlight. The Vatican never acknowledged its existence, and no copy has surfaced. But that mention of a vault beyond the edge of the sea would later appear again, this time in the trial confessions of a Templar, who spoke of preserving that which Babel broke. Was this the same library of the ancients hinted at in medieval alchemical circles, the same source Paracelsus cryptically referred to as the drowned memory? One doesn't need to prove it exists, only that enough powerful people once believed it did. And belief, especially in secret orders, is enough to shape actions. If the Templars discovered even fragments of these lost teachings, fragments linked to Atlantis, their fate begins to look less like destruction and more like diversion. A planned disappearance. Not into hiding, but into mission. Yet even among serious historians, the idea of a literal Atlantean library is hotly debated. Some consider it a metaphor, an allegory for pre-Socratic philosophies. Others insist it's just a regurgitation of flood myths. Still too many coincidences remain. Why do myths from disconnected cultures speak of hidden records beneath the sea? Why do ancient maps hint at sunken lands with structured layouts? And why did the Templars, above all others, possess sea charts long before maritime Europe even dared cross the horizon? A peculiar motif recurs in medieval Templar artifacts, an open book submerged in waves encircled by stars. To most, it's symbolic. But to a few, it's a map. And to trace that map, one must first ask who buried the library and who still guards it. Plato didn't mean to start a mystery. He meant to make a point. A parable of arrogance punished, a utopia undone by its own pride. But the problem with Atlantis, the problem that's endured for over 2,000 years,